Hey everybody, this is Alex, and we're finishing up today with a pretty substantial win. I've got my second three-figure day in a row, and following off these, 38, 11, 250 gross P&Ls, it's really nice to see that we're ticking up. However, I mentioned yesterday on Friday, that Friday was the sketchiest day in my account so far, and that record has been broken today. A lot of records were broken today. I've hit new highs on the account value. I hit high on profitability in net P&L and net ROE. However, I almost blew this day up. I made a lot of mistakes, and there are quite a few trades to go through. So what I'm going to do today, because my practice trade is actually what I want to talk about the most, I'm just going to run through the trades that I took and talk about my feelings of the overall day as opposed to running through the trades. So I took 6 trades today, and I was green on 5 of them. I had a big loser in terms of pennies per share on SES. SES was, of course, the trigger for all this momentum. I also took 2 trades on BIMI, which was sympathy momentum from SES, and we'll get to that shortly. But first, I'm just going to rip through what I was thinking on some of these trades and what went wrong, what went right. So you can see by the P&L per share here on my first 2 trades that these were basically scalps of about the same size. The second one was 250 shares, which made it a bigger winner. But these were pretty much a sign of my early indecision pre-market on SES. I was really happy coming into the day about the status of SES. It had held its levels that it gained after hours on Friday, and I thought it looked extremely strong for a big run again on continuation. However, you can tell by my entries and exits on these first 2 trades that I wasn't really all that confident, and my share size reflects that as well. My positions were pretty small, and I pretty much wasn't willing to hold. I wasn't looking to load up a big position as I was on Friday. That has a lot to do with the price, but it also has a lot to do with sort of a macroscopic view that I had on SES. I had come into the day impressed that it had held its levels, but I also thought that there would be quite a few people holding shares from Friday expecting continuation, whether they had taken them leading up to the bell during power hour or whether they had taken them after hours during that huge rip. I wasn't entirely sure, but I thought that there was a very high likelihood that there would be a big dump coming out of the bell. And this is largely why I closed this second trade so early at 987. It ended up ripping up to, I think, 1076 pre-market before pulling back. And I missed that whole move. I could have held this a lot longer and made like a really solid cushion on the day, but I didn't. And that was largely because I wasn't willing to hold going into the bell. Now, just before the bell, I had locked my level 2. I completely locked it, and I just told myself, like I did on Friday sort of, that I wasn't going to get involved. I had reviewed the mistake that I made on Friday of getting involved too early in the day, which ended up costing me a big loser that kind of put me off, and it threw off my confidence and ended up costing me a lot of the opportunity. So this day, what I did is I locked my level 2, crossed my arms, and just watched. And you can see by my next trade where it came out of in terms of time. I didn't take a trade for the first 35 minutes of the day. And SES, yeah, granted it tanked out of the open and was stair-stepping down pretty thoroughly. I did have hopes that, or expectations rather, that SES would bounce. But in the meantime, I got distracted by sympathy momentum on BIMI. So I'm going to walk through the orders on this BIMI trade because it's one that was managed pretty poorly and one where I got faked out a little bit. So my initial entry, as you can see, was only 125 shares on a $2 stock, which is an extremely small position. And most of that was based on the fact that I was getting in really high, and this thing was already extended. It had pretty low volume. It was unproven. And even though it was in the same sector as SES, I wasn't super convinced on it right away. So I decided to taper my risk because I was risking off the $2.30 level, which is 31 cents a risk. I didn't want to take 500 shares and risk going down 150 on this trade or anything like that. I ended up adding at 280, and that went well initially. However, I saw some resistance after the break of $3 and decided to bail on half the position at 301. I then changed my mind when it broke through the initial resistance, and it looked like we were going to go on a second tear. And I added half my remaining position, which was 47 shares, at 315. Now, all of this was preparation to load up for what I thought could be a parabolic move. I expected this to be a very good candidate for sympathy momentum that would go up, halt, etc., and would just rip. And so these entries at first, these were me taking really small positions on a stock that I figured would be highly volatile, and expecting that I would be able to add into it later. And that's exactly what I did on my practice trade, which is what I want to talk about most. So long story short on this first BIMI trade is that I got spooked at 290. Once I had taken this add-on at 315, my average cost had moved up to 286, and I had moved my stop up to 286, so that it was the break even on the rest, and I was not going to let myself go red. And what ended up happening was the first kind of physical mistake of the day was that I misread the level 2, I misread the tape, and I thought 290 was breaking, and I tried to bail out below 290, where there wasn't a whole lot of support on the level 2 below, and 290 ended up holding, and so I bailed out at the wrong time. And even though I closed the trade green with like a $40 winner or something, I felt really kind of disappointed with the result I got on this trade. Now, one quick note that I forgot to mention on my first BIMI trade was right here at 261 on this candle at right up here. That was a pre-halt phase. That's what I was chasing. I was chasing a halt the whole way up on my first trade on BIMI. And it never got there. It kept on doing false halts and dropping back down, and then false halting again and then dropping back down. And that's part of the reason why I moved my stop up so high, because generally in a false halt, if it doesn't work, it tends to reverse pretty hard. Now, during my trade on BIMI, SES made the breakout that I had been waiting for. You can see here it kind of based out at 850 and shot up from that level into a halt at 1069. That's the first halt level on SES of the day. And I missed all of this. It then resumed, dropped down a bit, and squeezed into another halt within probably 30 seconds of the resumption. And I missed all of that. This is an important note going into my next trade on SES. So I've lined up the 5-minute chart and the 1-minute chart to show exactly what happened coming out of the halt on SES, the second halt that is at 11:55. Now it resumed exactly at the halt level, or sorry, 2 pennies above the halt level. And I took an entry very quickly coming out of this halt, which was a super high risk entry. And when I say high risk, I mean high risk in terms of whether or not the play is going to work. I reduced that risk by taking only 50 shares, which I, once again, as usual, had intended to add to if the trade worked. And also a factor is that I was risking off the 1150 level, which was close to the halt. And so my entry compared to my risk was very high. It was like 75 cents. And that's pretty extreme, so I didn't want to get involved in a big loss, and that's why I only took 50 shares. Now, following a breakout after the resumption, it curled back down and started looking like I was going to get stopped out. And once again, I kind of got faked out rather by the level 2. And that cost me, definitely. I closed this trade at 11:55 on this candle right here at 10:32 a.m. And you can see that it never actually broke my stop. It bounced off 1150 and then rose back up on the next few candles. Now, my next trade on BIMI was right here. And I'll show you that on the chart, this is what I was looking at on the 1 minute. It's not super clear on the 5 minutes, so we're going to focus up here. And the level I was intending to risk off was 350. I had seen this pretty harsh drop, but it was on low volume. And it bounced right back up. And following a run up, this signaled to me the possibility of forming an ABCD pattern. And so what I was looking for was a medium-sized entry coming in with 500 shares at 376. That happened on this candle right here. And I wanted to load up on the way past $4. Now, I've fast forwarded the chart a little bit, and it isn't really even shown what happened on the 1 minute chart. It isn't super clear. I would need like a 15-second or a 10-second chart to really show what took place. But after getting my entry filled on this candle here for 500 shares, you can see that it blew past temporary support in the 366 area and blew past my stop. And I tried to get out at 349 and did not get filled. And I canceled my order almost right away because I had noticed support refreshing on the bid side. And so I decided, let's give this a minute and see what happens. And what happened is it popped right back up above 50. Following that break of 50, you can see on this candle, it started showing signs of a real run. And I thought, okay, well, let's see what it does at $4 and reevaluate at that time. It then bounced off $3.95 on this candle right here. And that's when I started having second thoughts. That bounce off $3.95 coincided exactly with the high of day at the time. And I wasn't super convinced. So I decided to take half off the table. As you can see on this order on the right-hand side, at 389 is where I got filled for 250 shares. So I booked a little bit of profit and kept 100 or 250 shares back with the intention of adding above $4 if it so broke. Now, once again, the whole story is not really told by these 1 minute candles, because my final exit was right here at 346 and 4 seconds. So right at the beginning of this candle is where I exited. And my reasoning for that was the thickness of the orders stacked at $4. I wasn't super convinced with the volume going through that there wasn't a huge hidden seller in there. I kind of got faked out, and I decided to just bail and reevaluate, which I later decided was a mistake. I'll get to that shortly. But you can see that it broke $4 and ended up making a pretty good run here. And now we've reached the last trade of the day, which was the disaster that made me shutter down. I had made quite a few sloppy mistakes on my previous trades. I had let myself get faked out here and there. And this one was just a trade that actually wasn't supposed to happen. The mistakes that I had made on my previous trades, those were a result of poor decision making, poor reactions, poor tape reading, whatever it was. This was actually just a misclick. A little side note about my hotkeys. I'll open them up for you to see. So you can see in this key section that all of my hotkeys require me to first hit control. And a lot of the time when I'm thinking about a trade or when I'm in a trade, I have control depressed at all times. And that's to be able to increase my reaction time on fast moving stocks like we have today. And what happened on SES on this last trade was I just scraped the entry key, which was this one, by 125 shares at the ask plus 2 cents. So I had my level 2 open and highlighted. The control key was depressed. And as I shifted my weight in my chair, my finger just slipped and I entered the trade for 125 shares. Now, at the time that I did that, it was going into a halt. So this is the chart that I was looking at on SES at the time that I entered my last trade. And you'll notice that even though it did dip below my intended stop, which may very well have made me stop out properly like I wanted to on my previous SES trade, this was delayed resolution on that setup. This was a longer period of consolidation, which shows that my initial entry was badly timed. But basically what I was looking at the level 2 and I saw I was about to halt. And I was trying to decide for myself. I was looking at the daily chart back here, trying to find resistance levels that were relevant, trying to see in the full market depth whether or not there were support levels I could maybe count on. And I was just thinking about it. And that's when I shifted my weight and I hit the buy button. And like a quarter of a second after I hit the buy button, it actually halted at 313 with my order going through at 1313. And my order went through at the ask at 13.18. Now, a few notes about what happened here is, first of all, I took 125 shares. That wasn't what I had intended. On the level 2, it looked like this at the time. This is what I had typed in on the level 2. So I had 50 shares selected. I was going to be a manual entry using this buy button. And the price that I had put in was 13.20. But when I hit the hotkey, none of this mattered anymore because the hotkey trumps the level 2. It resets the information on the level 2. So all of a sudden, I had 2.5 times the share size that I actually wanted going into this trade, which threw all of my risk calculations off. And on resumption, you can see it resumed lower. It resumed at 13 and immediately dipped down to 12.50. At the same time, the spreads had opened up to as much as, I believe, 65 cents or something like that, which really made me panic. And long story short, I just basically got lucky. It ended up recovering from that initial drop and squeezed up. And where I got filled was on the top of this candle. My exit up here, you can see for the whole thing at, shortly after this candle opened, was a few pennies off the top, and I got filled at 1371, which, by the way, was a result of an order at 1365. Now, this happens to be the first time in history that I have seen a DAS platform fill an order that's higher than the intended price. Typically, what happens is they'll give you exactly the price you want, and then they will make money on whatever the rest is. And this, I believe, I may be wrong, maybe I missed something at some point, but in my memory, this is the only time I've ever seen this happen. Now, today in Canada, it's Thanksgiving, and I must say that I don't really celebrate that right now, but today I'm really thankful of how I got bailed out on a lot of these trades. I made a tremendous number of mistakes, and I got bailed out basically by the FOMO of the general market. People are really excited. Traders have been waiting for days like this forever. Today we have two multi-100% runners, and people are excited, and that really is a big factor of why my last SES trade went okay. It's why I was able to squeeze profit out of it, and it's why this day is a $200 winner and not a $25 winner or possibly even a $50 loser or something like that. Now, going back to my trade log for a moment, we're looking at the 6 trades from today. The ones pre-market, I have mixed feelings about. I do think they were very safe. Something I do very well, as I've talked about before, is I taper my entry risk. I take small entries, I scale into positions, and that allows me to take a lot more pennies per share risk than I would normally do. It allows me to play setups that are that have less potential, and it lets me get away altogether with a lot more. And these 2 trades on SES pre-market are supposed to be a reflection of that. However, the one entry, one exit situation, that's not how these are supposed to go. These are supposed to be trades that I add into, and then I make more money on the upside that increases my risk-reward ratio. That's also how this BIMI trade, the first one, was supposed to go, but I messed up in a lot of places. I really screwed it up. And any trade that I have 3 entries on, that needs to be a substantial winner. And this, even though it was almost 5% ROI, this is not a big enough winner for what it was. This position was too small. I overreacted a lot in this trade. And you may notice if you've watched previous recaps, I've been talking about this. I've been actively saying I need to correct this. On my daily results right here, you can see that I took some days off in between. There were a couple of days off with no trades. And I mentioned it in previous recaps that I wasn't happy with the number of profitable failures, as I say, that I've had. Yeah, it's great that I'm able to do this, and I, have designed a structure that allows me to get into trades that have a lower success rate. But at the same time, these aren't A-quality setups. In the beginning, I was a lot more patient, and I was waiting for A-quality setups. And on a day like this, where I had 2 trades and both were winners, that's the kind of thing that I should be waiting for, and that this was in a dead market. If I had taken trades like I did on this day on October 1st, when the market is hot, I would be able to make a lot more money with it, and that isn't what I have been doing. So looking back on today right now, I'm pretty upset with how badly I have reacted to the lessons I've learned. These recaps that I make them for me. I'd still be making them for me even if I wasn't publicizing them. I'm publicizing them in the hopes that I can help somebody else and in order to attract traders to Freedom Trading, but they're really made for me. It's so I can look back on them, and I have been studying them very actively. And I've been noticing there's a pattern of I keep saying that I have to learn this lesson or that lesson, and yet I don't. And I feel that I've been repeating a lot of the mistakes. And this day, today, just as on Friday, I've been repeating a lot of the mistakes, and this has cut into my P&L. Like I mentioned on Friday should have been a $600 winner. Today could have been a grand slam where I made $1,000, and I didn't. And it's because I've been repeating a lot of the mistakes. Now, granted, it's partially because I got distracted by BIMI, and I didn't catch the move on SES. Now, I maintain that BIMI looked really high potential at the time, and looking back on it now, it did resolve. However, I didn't capture that resolution the way I was supposed to, and this all brings me to my practice trade. Now, the runtime on this has already got a little carried away, and so I'm just going to show you all the information for the practice trade that I took on BIMI. It was a high of day breakout coming out of a halt where there was some consolidation taking place, and I wanted to pounce on that consolidation, scale into it for an expected move that coincided very well with the window that was available on the daily chart. And one thing I'll note about my exits is that these two exits that I have listed on my entry and exit calculator, this is actually one exit. I just got filled at different prices, which is why the commissions on the second one are 0. Now, this trade is very much how all the other ones were supposed to happen today. This is what I mean when I say tapering risk, scaling in. My first entry was at $4.94, and that was almost 20 cents higher than I had intended. I was trying to get in for a high of day break above $4.78, and I did so with a hotkey with 250 shares. And because I used a hotkey, I just took whatever was available on the level 2. And my reaction time to see the actual price wasn't fast enough. And so I got filled almost 20 cents higher than I wanted to. There was just a huge gap on the ask side, and it jumped up very quickly. And so that threw me off. And despite being thrown off by this fill, I still managed to average in perfectly and get a great average of whatever it was there, $5.14. And following my first add-on here at $5, I was never at risk of losing money in this trade. And this is what I've been talking about in previous recaps when I say that I'm good at tapering risk, and on the winning side, I'm able to score sometimes 9 or 10 to 1 risk reward ratios by doing this. And even this trade, I made some mistakes. My last exit was a mistake. I should have held these and I could have run up all the way back to $6. But I got spooked, and I made the same type of mistake that I had made in my simulator today, where I got spooked by the level 2, or I mistimed some things and I hit the exit key too early. This 525 level, this was supposed to be my stop, so I should have exited below this level, and I anticipated it a little too quick, and I ended up getting out. And following me getting out, the stock curled back up and went all the way back up to $6. And so I could have held both these. I could have made arguments for both these last two exits to just hold half my position all the way back to my initial entry of 514, which is often what I do. Once I ditch half the position, I reset my stop to my average, which means that the rest is gravy, basically. I take the profit right away, and then I want to ride the rest of it to try and hold for a parabolic move, especially on a day like today where we have multiple stocks running into the hundreds of percent. These kinds of things don't always happen. And so when they do happen, you have to capitalize. And on this trade, I did a decent job of capitalizing. I did get above 5%. My share size was decent. My entries and exits reflected my confidence very well. I was never risking more than, I think, $50 on this trade, which means I got close to a 5 to 1 risk reward, which is good, but it could have been better. And so this trade really, what I want to point out about this trade is that this is what the rest of them are supposed to look like. These are it goes to show the mistakes that I've been making in my simulator account. And this is ideally what I want to make, what I want the stats to look like on my current balance on my simulator. I want to be having $200 winners on one trade instead of a bunch of these little, $40 here, $60 here, whatever. Because look at the commissions difference. Let's do the math. 1365 into 259.56 is 5% on my commissions. If we look at my best winner from today, it'd be 640 into 90, I guess. And that is 7.1%. And a lot of these are worse. Like if we look at this one, for instance, my first trade on BMI, or BIMI rather, 975 into 4093 is 23.82%. That's absolutely unacceptable. I could sustain those kinds of commissions percentages, but it would be a lot better for me not to. And so this is why, I'm really focused on scaling in. And when I have the confidence, when I wait for the setup, which this setup in my practice trade was really good. Now, at this point in the day, I decided it doesn't matter how good the setup is. I'm going to lock myself out for a little bit just to let my emotions cool from all the mistakes I'd made. And that's why this wasn't a real trade, and why I'm going to delete the result from my net P&L today. So I'm going to close this video out right now. I did just recently, in between the last segment, I took another practice trade on BIMI, which was an amazing risk reward pretty much yet again. I got 4-1 on what was basically a late scalp. I got in at a really bad time. I took a bad entry, and I was risking off a bidder on the level 2, and I was risking 9 cents per share on 250 shares, which if I had lost, I'll walk you through the math here. If I had lost, let's say with no slippage, 9 cents times 250 shares, I would have lost $22. In addition to commissions, would have been maybe 30. With slippage, maybe 40. And what I got out of it was $180. And that goes to show the strength that I was just talking about. But more importantly, let's go back to sympathy momentum and show how BIMI and SES, which are both energy stocks, are moving step for step right now. Focus mainly on the 5-minute chart down here and the pattern that it has made. And as I switch between them, you'll see a huge amount of similarity, especially since this run up right here. They pulled back at exactly the same place and exploded just as aggressively in both cases. Look at that. So this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be looking for tomorrow going into the bell. I definitely will be looking for a fresh gapper. I'm not really all that interested in touching these two names at this point. They're far too extended in my opinion. The risk of a T12 halt is becoming more and more real, especially BIMI. And so let's just hope that this momentum continues and we have another great day tomorrow. And certainly a more clean day than I've had in the last two. So that's it for me today, guys. I'm going to say goodbye. And if you have any comments, leave them below. I will be able to get around to them as long as there aren't too many. And just a quick note about recap for day number 8. I realized last night when I was uploading some of these that I actually accidentally deleted my recap for that day. So if you're wondering why that one is missing, it's because I deleted it. I will remake it. I'm just waiting for a good time, a slow time for me to be able to remake that. It wasn't a very exciting day, as you can see, but I will remake that and re-upload it at some point.